Building a SaaS platform as a non-technical founder can be tricky. For early stage startups, the struggle starts with building an MVP as soon as possible. Whether you outsource or having in-house developers, you might think, yeah, that's the end of my tech worries, but it's far from over. Here are some of the things that I hear from founders at pre-seed and seed stages that have approached me for help. I'm struggling to wrap my head around Agile, and this is one of my favorite ones. I've developed and I've paid developers, and I didn't get what I wanted. I've outsourced to a development company, but I'm struggling to oversee the development myself as I have so much work to do. I'm a tech founder, and I'm struggling to get developers to follow the right processes and deliver by the deadlines. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's way more. Just as well, they reached out to the Mary Poppins of startups. Now, let's find out my thoughts in this episode. Welcome to the Mary Poppins of Startups live show. I'm Nelly Makangu from Athena Leaders. As a tech consultant and startup advisor, I will answer live the burning question that you have on your way to Series A+. Subscribe and tune in every week for top tips to meet amazing guests, startup founders, investors, and more. More importantly, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Let's hear some of the questions that I've got. So, of course, to prepare for this episode, I pulled a call out on social media, and I actually got a few people adding even to my list of questions. And I also did a bit of a brainstorming to kind of remember a lot of the things that people come to me for. So let's see the first question. Hello, Naili. I'm a non-tech founder, and I'm currently struggling to implement agile processes with my team. What would you recommend? I wanted to start with this question because this is one of the questions that I get a lot. We are in love with agile, and I personally really love agile, and I think it's such a great way to help startups to move quickly, not just startup innovation world and for large companies. Now, the problem that I have with agile is that people believe that it's just a way to move forward without thinking about the underlying processes that actually help the fact that you can work in an iterative process and you can work faster. But if you do not have the processes in place, this is not going to work. So one of the things, or some of the things I've done for some of my clients, whenever we were about to start working agile, whether they have team in-house or outsourced, you need to bring the teams together and coach them. I was working with a team and development team in a SME in London, and they were going through a digital transformation. They were using agile processes, but they were still not launching anything, especially after working for over a year. It dawned on me when I started evaluating the company that they were building at least 5 products at the same time, using the agile methodologies. They were doing 2-week sprints and all of those great stuff, but it wasn't really effective. One of the problems was that the company and different departments didn't really understand what agile was. So the first thing I did was to sit down with the executive team, from the CEO and then go through other teams as well, just to kind of break apart what is a software development process, right? So the first thing you want to know if you are struggling with agile, first make sure that everybody that you work with understand the software development processes, and that's what I did. I coached the teams. Then I coached my own team because I was the interim head of product at the time. So I coached my team to also make sure that they were following the right processes to work with agile. And I work with the outsourced team. Remember, outsourced teams are still part of the company, and I've also brought them in with us so that we all have the same understanding of agile. Now, as part of the work that I do as well, especially when I try to explain to people what agile is and obviously go through all of the bits and pieces, the most important thing to remember is what to watch out for and what not. Sometimes agile can be overcomplicated. Whether for me, I believe that as an early stage or even pre-seed and seed, your company moves a lot. What are the things that you want to incorporate what are the things that you want to just know about it, and you got to focus on that as the company matures or grows. So it's important to know what to watch out for, what to avoid, and I bring all of that goodness with me when I go to companies, because I believe that regardless of the stages they are at, especially when working with non-technical founders, they're building SaaS platforms or others, then I make sure that they really understand the processes. We start the projects with a baseline where we are all talking about the same definition of agile. So if you want me to go into a lot more detail on the actual processes and the agile processes and how to bring that in the organization, then do put a comment on this video, whether you find me, whatever you find on whichever platform you found me, and I will pick them up and have another Q&A session and answer it live. So then we're going to look at the next question. And again, these are the questions that were sent to me through the call out that we put out, and also the work that I do with my clients. What approaches do you employ to bridge the communication gap to help my non-tech co-founder understand why certain aspects of platform development can be time consuming? Please help. This is a very interesting one. And I believe we've done one episode on this podcast. You might want to go and check it out. And it was about how not to fall in love with your CTO. And that is something that honestly is one of the biggest struggle that I see in startups, especially if the CEO is come from a non-technical background, doesn't understand all of the developments, and that can cause friction within the team. And as I mentioned before, if you are on the technical side and you want to help your co-founder understand the process, tell them that, explain it to them. What is the software development practices? What are the areas that people miss out because they want to go faster? What is technical debt? And all of those great things. Another thing that I do, for me, when I start working with non-technical founders and they really struggle to appreciate the development and why it takes time, I just try to find simple examples, either based on their platforms or general examples, and break it down with them so that they can really go through the journey with me on those very basic features. And they get this, wow, those are basic features and it took us this much time. Now I understand a little bit more. So rather than just coaching or training them via theory, I create exercises and things that they can do so that they can see and feel it. The more they feel it, the more they reflect. Remember that a journey of a founder, especially a first-time founder, there's a lot of learning that happens all the way around. So that's why it is important that the learning is not just theoretical. It's not just us pushing technical information to them. And of course, I try to use as little jargon as possible and examples. But I believe that a good way of learning is through exercises. Now, I've done that with one of my clients. We had an outsourced team. So I was the bridge between the CEO and the outsourced team, making sure that the tech teams, the outsource, were working, they were very effective, but I'll make sure that they working on the right prioritization, on the right features. What are we doing? How can we move a bit faster? And also working with the CEO so that he can understand how much time we have for development, how much budget we have, and we don't overbuild things. Now, one of the simple exercises that I did, we were at the stage where we were building a dashboard for the platform, and he really wanted to have a lot of metrics on the dashboard, right? Because of course, as a non-technical founder, you probably have seen so many SaaS platforms with amazing, beautiful dashboards, and the UI looks amazing. But one thing that she didn't see was the amount of time and effort and how much it cost to actually build those. So I sat down with him and I thought, okay, first, we're not going to do all those metrics because we need to build the basic that we need to go on the validation stage with clients. But let us sit down and work through understanding metrics enough, writing down the requirements, and then passing it on to development and continue the discussions. Now, of course, writing down the requirement is on me to do, so that I'll pass it on to the development team and they can break it down into user stories even more. But the process of just understanding and validating, researching why these requirements, why not this one, how do we want it to, how can you help the technical team to see how we want to present that, and what kind of information come from that. I don't need to know exactly which shape the chart which shape we're going to use, whether it's a bar chart or a pie chart and all of those kind of things. We have someone in UI and UX that can help us with all of those kind of things. But we need to understand roughly what information is relevant to the user. How are they going to use that information? And just sitting there and spending at least, we had the first working session was about 2 hours, and you saw how long it took to work on each metrics. Was a wow moment. Sometimes, especially when you work with non-technical people, teaching is okay. There's so many courses out there. They love to teach is great, but learning by doing, and especially with a professional that can help you along the way, because I can see where they're stuck. And I've got a lot of experience running a lot of workshops for various different organizations, holding people by their hands, leadership training, tech training. So I know how to move people gently, but to the point where they have the realizations. So they've learned through doing. And my other favorite example is to explain and help people to understand the complexity that goes through building a login page. If they can understand how something as simple as creating a login diagram and the questions that as technical people ask ourselves when the non-technical people and the rest of the world is not watching, just for what we call a simple login screen. Yes, if you can get that, then it helps them open their eyes to see how they build other features. And again, if you want me to go into more detail, and the process is step by step, or even if you want me to share with you the exercise that I do, especially on the login screen, then make sure to comment, reach out to me on social media, and I'll be more than happy to help you help the non-technical people. So now we're going to look at the next question in terms of how do we help non-technical founders answer all the questions that they have when they are building SaaS platforms. And here's the next question we're looking at. How do you handle talented individuals who resist following processes? I have a great employee who forgets to follow processes, but I don't want to hinder the innovation and productivity. Ooh, this is another juicy one. And this one, I see that a lot, especially for startups where they have a team of very, very good developers, right? Sometimes this can also happen with outsourced teams. But this scenario, I get that a lot when it's people who you have a lot of developers and you have to manage them. You might have a CTO or not. First of all, on the topic of CTO, for pre-seed, even up to the early stage pre-seed level startups, when we are talking about CTO, we are really talking about very good developers, right? And as the company matures, your CTO becomes more strategical. They don't really do coding. So it's really important that, the term CTO gets used quite a lot, but it also means a lot of different things. So you can have a lot of really good developers or a first-time CTO who will spend most of his time doing development work anyway. The issue that I have is when they are not working well together. And I give you an example. I spoke to a startup. We were working on building their tech and product, and I am their advisor actually. And the challenge he came up to me was the fact that he built the backend himself because he's the technical founder. And he did some of the UI, but that needed to be changed. So he brought someone that can look after the UI, and they redesigned the UI, and it looks absolutely beautiful. Whilst he agrees with the new UI created, he also brought in a front-end developer who might want to become a co-founder at some point. They're still in those negotiation phases. Now, the interesting part was that the front-end developer has a lot more experience or work experience than the UI developer. And the front-end developer doesn't really agree with some of the designs, and he wanted a redesign. So rather than working as a team, front-end developer and UI kept on fighting constantly. And the CEO, who, again, he's got a technical background, but it's his first time handling difficult personalities, difficult teams, technical teams, people who have a lot of opinions. So I sat with him to understand first, what are some of the processes that you followed? What is the structure of the team, and how are you collaborating? What are the roles and responsibilities? And just being able to do that help him to understand how to have a productive discussions, right, with his technical teams. And again, another thing that sometimes we forget when we are in the technical world and people think about tech, we forget that we are still dealing with people, and leadership is key and it's really important. So I coach my clients to handle the conversation with the front end designer so that even though he has more experience and he's working with someone else who's junior, how are you going to lead and empower them to have a vision, but to also see and recognize your skill set and why you want it to be tweaked? Remember that your UI person is eventually going to grow within the team, and your front-end developer will also grow as the team grows. So especially if you want to be a co-founder, he needs to start tackling those kind of issues and discussions in a more productive way, forgetting just about you, active listening, and all of that good stuff, right? So I know that this deviated a little bit from the processes question, but I really wanted to put it in there because I find that the leadership aspect is also something that a lot of founders struggle with, and I do help them to recognize that so that they can get the team going. The next thing I do, again, for me, it's important to know that in a startup running quickly, there's not a lot of time to stop completely. So it's important that from the basic and the very beginning, are there any kind of processes, even if it's very light, that we can follow in terms of the way that we're working? Where we are going to store our code, what are we doing for QA, testing, passwords, and so much more. So when I work with the team, I always love to kind of have this approach where you are driving them in terms of this is what we need to do, but make sure that they have the flexibility. So as I go back to the agile processes, the first thing I do is really make sure that before people even go down and get excited about coding, we have enough session to understand what we are going to build next, why we are building that, what is it, why it's important for us, why it's important to get roughly on time, it's development, but more importantly, the budget and the impact on us. Development needs to know that. And I know that I've seen that a lot of people do not want to bother the developers with those kind of information, but I think that that is actually a mistake. You don't need to give them the all in and out. So it's not about sharing war and peace with them, but it's about sharing enough for them to really be in and excited about what they're doing and understand where we're going to stop. Making sure that you have processes to review frequently, to look at the code, and also to have a demo of the code base, not a demo, especially if they are outsourced. Avoid having demos where they pre-recorded that and sharing it with you. But you need to kind of see that they've run the code and you are working or the demo in the active platform to see how far they've gone. So there's a lot of little tips and tricks that I use when I work with them. But I genuinely believe that, it's really important to make sure that when you're working with developers, that there is some kind of procedure and processes that you follow, and you make them accountable to do that as well. Now, if you have any more questions on that, please let me know, and I will be more than happy to answer live. Do remember, we are also running our one-to-one tech and product mentoring sessions. So if there's anything I've said resonated with you and you feel like, oh my God, yes, I would either want to work with you or I want to just come and ask you a question, that's perfectly fine by me. Go on my website and you'll see there's a banner that usually are up there. So you're not going to miss it. So book your session either to come and speak to me directly so I can see how we can help and work together, or if you'd like to just come in and drop by and kind of check us out first, more than happy to do that. Okay, so let's see if we have another question. I can't believe I'm admitting to this. Great start. But as a non-tech SaaS founder, I know we are focusing on the wrong areas, but as my team are technical, I don't know how to best approach this. That is very interesting. And it feels like a bit of a losing control of your technical team. And sometimes it happens, especially if the challenge the technical team is working on is quite exciting. That can happen. But one thing I wanted to highlight here is that we are focusing on the wrong areas of work, but my team is technical. Now, this is really, really important that as a non-technical founder, sometimes the focus is not just on the coding, and it focuses on what is it that you are doing and why. So when I work with technical teams, I made it very clear that in the way that we are working, to constantly repeat the message of why Why? Why are we working on this? And then there are other few questions that are also asked. But this message shouldn't just be done once and you forget about it, right? And this is what I see a lot of people do. Even when I'm working with outsourced teams, where it could be the developers are in-house or especially outsourced, I made sure that every call that we have starts with that questions. It can be in the documentation that we will write after for the call. It could be during the call. And more importantly, if we are not in the same country, then how do we use asynchronous communication, which is mean just talking even on Slack and all of those applications, to continuously send the same message? So if you are working on the wrong areas of work, my question is why? And the other thing, how much is that costing you? That is really important. How much is it costing you for you to work in the wrong areas? Now, it could be because you are working agile, but the loose sense of agile, which is just keep going. How do you reel that back in and get the team to focus on what you want them to do, right? Sometimes it's hard to stop, but there are different strategies that I use to get a startup to kind of stop and focus on. If you keep on running, you think you're going the right way, but especially building the wrong features is just sending you off the cliff much quicker than you can. So if this is a kind of a building relationship issues as well, if what kind of level of relationship and trust you have with the team. Sometimes you work with people who are very stubborn. And again, another things, don't really like this strategy, but if it's needed, remember that in startups, hire cautiously and slow, but fire fast. If you are constantly building on the wrong things, I don't think it's just a one individual problem, right? There's something fundamentally wrong with the processes and maybe even the culture or how, not maybe the culture, but how the project was set up. So yes, I would definitely love, if you are in the situation, I would love to speak to you, because it's kind of hard to advise generally because there are so many different scenarios. But this is something that you need to nip in the bud. And if you might stop development, do that. And sometimes, again, this is kind of one of the aspects I love about my role being fractional. One of the things that I do when I work with these teams, you don't have to work with me all the time, right? Because the pressure that people have when they have someone on the payroll all the time, they have to keep on developing because we're paying them. So we have to keep on developing. But sometimes, especially early stage, you might have built something that got you to the stage you wanted to be, and you need a gap. The gap is important to go do the validation. The gap is important for you to kind of think, depending on what you're building. And if you need that gap and you're working with someone like me that's fractional, then it's okay. We stop, and I'll be around if you need any kind of advisory sessions or whatever. Once we're ready to get back up to speed, let me know. Yet, if they are on the payroll, sometimes I see the tendency of building for the sake of it. Depending on how on what your runway is. Yes, if you can do continuous development, that's actually good. So that even if you are doing the validation with customers, you are continuing to develop. That helps you to move faster. But every startup is different. And as I've said, if you want to talk about your particular step, then let me know. Now, one other thing I wanted to talk about, right? We focus so much right now on the non-technical startups. And when we talked about the stubbornness, I'm also thinking a little bit about technical founders. Sometimes you could be the one who's also very stubborn. And that's another thing that I see. So how do I work with technical founders when they've also lost their way in a way, but they don't realize that? I've seen a lot of technical founders that love to build. That's the comfort zone. And quite frankly, I understand. I mean, I come from a technical background. And when I started my business and I knew I had to focus a lot on marketing and sales, I felt like, oh my God, I love to develop ideas. I love to work with clients. But I need to have the discipline to know that marketing, sales, business development, speaking to people, validation are also extremely important. So the same happens whenever I work with technical founders. Now, with non-technical founders, I help them with the technical part. I'm the bridge in between the technical and the non-technical. I coach them and help them to grow and coach the team so that they understand how to work better together and build and launch faster. Whilst with the technical team, I help them, give them the right directions to make sure that we are hitting the deadlines and everything. But with technical founders, I actually do the opposite, where I help them to get out of the code. It's like, just go in and like get out, get out and see what's out there. Go and talk to people. Get out of your comfort zone. You don't need to build every features or every ideas that you have in your mind. And I work with a founder that's already at the prototype, and he was great, but he always felt like one more thing. And I'm like, no, there's no more one more thing. And I helped him to have a structure so that he gets slowly comfortable to knock on the doors. And I told him straight, if this is not your comfort zone, you need to find a non-technical you need to find a co-founder that can help you handle that aspect. But you are still the CEO, is your idea, and you need to learn how to do that, because you will need to convince other customers and investors as well. So it's important for me for technical founders to understand that aspect. And after working with someone for a while, if I believe that they still want to stay in the code, then I don't see the point of continuing a relationship with him, because why are they paying me for, right? So I think that's also very important. I don't work with just anybody for the sake of it. I get really passionate about my work, and I want to provide as much value as possible. Sometimes I find that people need to grow at different stages, and I work a lot to help people to grow, even whilst we are delivering on the technical aspect or the leadership or whatever I'm doing. But there are times where someone love the idea of entrepreneurship, but might not be ready to kind of push themselves out on the comfort zone. So there are different techniques that I use from that, where I kind of change the nature of coaching to help them get there mentally before we can go back and just go like, yes, we flying through that. So this is it. I don't know if we have any more questions popping up, so let me know. So I'm going to see for the next couple of minutes if you have a question. Oh, yes, we have something exciting. Hi, Naili. Thanks for taking the time to help me out. How can I make sure I hire the best team for SaaS platform as a non-tech founder? Yes, that's a really good question. So when I work with teams to help them hire teams, it's pretty much to kind of first develop the profile of who you want to work with. Now, I know that there is this preference about having a team in-house. If you first start, outsourcing could be the best way for you, whether we're talking no code or development. But if you do not have the budget or the mind space of managing team internally, then do it externally. Now, when it comes to recruitment and hiring, again, one of the things that I do is to help the team through my contacts, trying to help with the hiring as much as I can. But most importantly, to start thinking about building a relationship with the people that might potentially come to your team much earlier. Don't wait for crunch time. We are at a time where it's getting harder and harder to hire certain tech roles. So the earlier you can do that, the better. But of course, whilst we are going through the hiring process, understand the impact it will have on your company, right? Who do you need? There are so many roles that you can hire for. You don't want to hire all the roles at the same time. You first obviously depend on the budget that you have, and you want to do it in a strategical way. So I sit with my clients to be able to understand what are the roles, the gaps that they have, and the roles that we need to hit next, and how we're going to hit that. What are the objectives and the work that we want them to do when they start? How are we going to onboard them, and all of that? Now, again, as a non-technical founder, it's really important that you have that understanding in place, and make sure that you also have good relationship with people, whether they are fractional CTO, fractional CPO, fractional whatever, consultants, advisors, but have good relationship with people that you can bring in to help you during the interviews and assessment of the different candidates, so that you make sure that you are strengthening the teams. And of course, also think about who do you want your first hire to be. Can it be someone that can be technically enough to be able to help with some of the discussions as well, so that the hiring process doesn't stop and stop you from moving forward? That's why I jump in and kind of help my clients in this process as well, because I know that they have so many other things that they need to do in terms of running the business in general, relationship with investors, and so much more. As I said before, if you want me to go into details in any of the things that we've talked about, I'll be more than happy to do that. If you are at the early stage of building your platform and you're thinking, I love what you're talking about, and I want to see whether we can work together, then please let me know. I'm more than happy to kind of define a working relationship with you to understand what are your struggles and to let you on your way. And remember, as a non-technical founders, yes, there is the education part that's important. And I do have some strategy to help boost your education as well, not just for yourself, but from those of your teams as well. But I also am a big believer in learning by doing, and I also help you to learn by doing without you having to learn the technical aspect or coding or anything. So don't worry about that. I believe we have one more question coming in. Okay. Are there any scalability challenges we need to anticipate as our user base grows, and how we overcome them as a team? Yes, so that one will always happen. And in fact, I will advise that you watch the episode of my podcast. I'm just going to my mental database very quickly. We watched the episode on the podcast when we talked about startup bottlenecks. I believe we had Varun Agarwal, a CTO expert, and one that you will see a lot on our platforms and some of the projects that we're working on. Now, it's one of the issues that I have when it comes to scalability is one, scaling too quickly, right? So as a startup, you're thinking, oh yeah, we're gonna launch, people will jump in to go to the door, and we need to build the biggest platform as possible. So the way you will set up your platform, your servers, capacity, and everything is done on the basis of a kind of a very large exponential users base at the first time when you launch, but it might not be the case. So it's actually good that when you start working with people to really start thinking a little bit about what is the basic that we need, and you will define that based on the different testing that you have. SaaS platform, remember that you might have one client, but the number of seats or the number of users might be large or small depending on what you have. So as one of the good advice I have, when you start thinking about scalability and how to at least define the platform at the beginning, pay a lot of attention to the data that you get from the pilot. Data that you get from the pilot will help you to understand how can we scale and in the future. But it doesn't mean that you have to pre-scale the platform. And as you start pre-scaling the platform later, again, it's based on the data that you will get, how many transactions you have. And if you're expecting a big load of people coming in your platform, let's say you've signed another contract and there's other people coming in, then yes, think about how you are going to also manage the processes of looking and making sure that things don't drop between the gap as you have the more users on the platform, everything crash. But there is a process that goes through that, and it's not about building the largest platform as possible at the beginning. And by that, I'm moving more into like servers or like AWS and those kind of things, and how you're going to set it up, shardings and all of that. But you also want to kind of look at how are you going to do that incrementally so that you are not overpaying on storage and all of that kind of good stuff. And you, yes, and then you can size it the right way. So this is what we had for this session, and I believe there are more questions coming in, but I cannot answer all of them right now as we need to wrap up this episode. I'll be more than happy to do a part 2 where we start tackling and really diving into those kind of discussions of issues that non-technical founders have, especially when they are building SaaS platforms. If you identified yourself through the discussion that we have and you want to go into more details, remember, we run a one-to-one free coaching sessions, mentoring sessions. We bring in other tech experts as well, depending on what the questions are. And we give you our attention, and we make sure that by the time you leave that one-to-one sessions, as many other people have done before you, you actually go with something that is actionable. It's not just you dropping in and says, hey, Naili, let's have a chat. Love to, but let's get to work. That's the point of those sessions. And if you want to, you don't want to wait and you kind of want to have a call and see how we could work together, then reach out to me. You know where I am. In the meantime, let's design a happy and productive workplace playground together.